Welcome to the Mind Spark, bringing you the latest news from around the world. On the morning of July 3, 2025, an unusual hush fell over the White House press briefing room. The familiar clatter of keyboards and the low hum of conversation were absent, replaced by a heavy, expectant silence. Rows of empty chairs faced the podium, bathed in the sterile glow of overhead lights, as if the room itself was holding its breath. Reporters and White House aides gathered around television screens, their eyes fixed on live footage of the Supreme Court building. The air was thick with anticipation as everyone waited for a decision that would not only define the limits of presidential power, but also set a precedent for years to come. The usual chaos of the press room, shouted questions, ringing phones, hurried footsteps, had given way to tense anticipation. President Trump's controversial trade policies, which had sparked debate and division across the country, now hung in the balance. Every journalist, aide, and staffer knew that history was about to be made. But it wasn't just Washington that waited. Across the nation, in factories, on farms, and in small businesses, Americans paused their daily routines to watch the news. Factory workers huddled in break rooms, farmers checked their phones between rows of crops, and business owners gathered around laptops, all aware that their livelihoods could change in an instant. For some, the tariffs represented hope, a shield against foreign competition and a promise of job security. For others, they were a source of anxiety, threatening higher costs, lost markets, and economic hardship. The stakes were deeply personal, touching families and communities in every corner of the country. As the Supreme Court justices entered the courtroom, the nation watched with bated breath. The decision before them was more than a legal technicality. It would shape the economic future of millions and test the very boundaries of American democracy. In the press room, journalists sat poised, fingers hovering over keyboards, microphones ready, knowing that the story they were about to report would be remembered for generations. The weight of the moment was palpable. This was history unfolding in real time. The constitutional showdown had drawn clear battle lines. The executive branch, led by President Trump, faced off against the judiciary, while Congress watched closely, its own authority hanging in the balance. The outcome would ripple through all three branches of government, redefining the separation of powers. At the heart of the case was a fundamental question: can a president, acting alone, reshape America's trade relationships and alter the course of the nation's economy? Or does such power require the consent of Congress and the checks and balances enshrined in the Constitution? The answer, soon to be delivered by the 9 justices, would echo far beyond the marble steps of the Supreme Court. Around the world, leaders, investors, and ordinary citizens listened and waited, knowing that what happened in Washington today could shape the global order for years to come. The news alert flashed, its urgency unmistakable, the kind of headline that instantly grabs the nation's attention. Phones buzzed, television switched to live coverage, and social media feeds erupted with speculation. In a matter of seconds, the story was everywhere. The Supreme Court had spoken, delivering a rare and resounding 9-0 decision. In a move that stunned political observers, the justices ruled decisively against the president's claim of unilateral tariff authority, making it clear that no single branch could wield such sweeping power over trade. The word unanimous sent shockwaves through the press room and beyond. Reporters exchanged wide-eyed glances, realizing the magnitude of what had just happened. Newsrooms scrambled to update headlines, and analysts rushed to interpret the implications. It was a total rejection of the administration's legal argument, a historic rebuke that would be studied for years to come. The White House, caught off guard, watched the coverage in stunned silence, aware that the decision would have far-reaching consequences. President Trump erupted online, calling the decision a total disgrace. His posts were filled with frustration and defiance, but the legal reality was clear. The highest court in the land had spoken with one voice, and there was no room for ambiguity. The ruling immediately invalidated the tariffs at the heart of his America First agenda. Billions of dollars in trade policy were suddenly in limbo, and businesses across the country began recalculating their next moves. The ports, once symbols of economic conflict, now represented a return to order. The drama shifted. How would the president respond to such a decisive check on his power? Advisors huddled in urgent meetings, weighing political options and drafting statements. Across the nation, Americans watched, waiting for the next move in this high-stakes confrontation. Legal scholars hailed the decision as a landmark defense of the Constitution. On television and in classrooms, experts explained how the ruling reaffirmed the separation of powers, ensuring that no president could bypass Congress on matters of international commerce. Justices from both parties, conservative and liberal alike, affirmed a fundamental principle: only Congress can regulate foreign commerce. Their unity sent a powerful message about the enduring strength of American democracy. Wall Street surged on news of restored stability. Global leaders reacted with relief. Markets rallied, investors breathed easier, and foreign governments welcomed the return of predictability in U.S. trade policy. The era of unpredictable unilateral U.S. trade actions was over. International businesses resumed negotiations, and American exporters looked forward to clearer rules and renewed partnerships. The decision was more than legal; it was a global event. From Beijing to Berlin, from London to Los Angeles, people watched as the United States reaffirmed its commitment to constitutional checks and balances. America's constitutional guardrails had held. The system designed by the founders had proven resilient, even in the face of extraordinary pressure. The gavel fell, echoing around the world, a symbol of justice, order, and the enduring power of the rule of law. The balance of power was restored, and with it, a renewed faith in the American system of government. A reminder that, even in turbulent times, the Constitution remains the nation's guiding light. To grasp the Supreme Court's decision, we must understand the policy it struck down. Trump's America First tariffs aim to protect U.S. industries and punish countries like China for unfair trade. Supporters saw the tariffs as a lifeline for American workers and manufacturing. Critics warned they would backfire, raising costs and triggering retaliation. Farmers lost markets, businesses faced higher prices, and some industries suffered layoffs. The nation was divided. Some towns celebrated new jobs, others mourned lost ones. The tariffs created winners and losers, often side by side. The debate was fierce: protection or pain. The Supreme Court's ruling would settle more than just policy. The Supreme Court's ruling wasn't about tariffs, it was about power. The justices cited the Constitution: only Congress can regulate foreign commerce. The founders feared concentrated power, so they built checks and balances. The president's sweeping tariffs, without new congressional approval, overstepped executive authority. Past laws allowed limited, targeted tariffs, not a broad trade war. The court made clear, major economic shifts require Congress, not just the president's pen. The ruling reaffirmed the separation of powers. The system had been tested and prevailed. The tariff war's impact was deeply personal for many Americans. It wasn't just a matter of numbers or headlines. It was about families, livelihoods, and the future of entire communities. In small towns and rural areas, the effects rippled through every aspect of daily life, touching people in ways that statistics could never fully capture. In Iowa and Nebraska, generations of farmers watched their markets vanish almost overnight. With nowhere to sell their crops, many faced the heartbreaking reality of foreclosure, forced to auction off land that had been in their families for decades. The sense of loss was profound, not just financially but emotionally. These were more than just fields, they were legacies. In Ohio, a bicycle shop owner saw costs soar as imported parts became more expensive. Sales dropped sharply, and the dream of running a thriving local business began to slip away. Each empty day in the shop was a reminder of how quickly fortunes could change. Even industries that were supposed to benefit, like furniture makers, found themselves struggling. The price of materials rose, squeezing already thin margins. Factory floors grew quieter as orders slowed, and workers worried about their jobs. Across the country, small businesses and workers faced mounting debt and growing uncertainty. Bills piled up, and the fear of having to close their doors became a daily reality for many. Lobster fishermen in Maine, whiskey distillers in Kentucky, and countless others lost access to international markets due to retaliatory tariffs. Crates of unsold goods piled up, and the future of these proud industries hung in the balance. The policy's goal was to protect American jobs, but for many, it brought only hardship and uncertainty. Layoffs became common, and the sense of security that once defined these communities began to erode. Planning for the future became nearly impossible. Families gathered around kitchen tables trying to make sense of shrinking budgets and uncertain prospects. Business owners stared at calendars, unsure if they could make it another month. The human cost was measured in lost opportunities, sleepless nights, and daily stress. Parents worried about providing for their children, and workers wondered if they would ever regain stability. The economic pain was real, widespread, and often invisible to policymakers in distant capitals. For many, It felt as though their struggles were overlooked, their voices unheard. The Supreme Court's decision offered a glimmer of hope, a chance for relief and a possible turning point. Communities across the country waited anxiously, hoping for a sign that things might finally change. For many, that decision couldn't come soon enough. The hope for a better tomorrow was all they had left, and they clung to it, waiting for the day when opportunity might return to America's heartland. The Supreme Court's decision brought a wave of relief across the country. Business owners and farmers could finally plan without fear of sudden policy shifts. The Ohio bike shop owner lowered prices and saw customers return. Farmers began to hope for reopened markets and stable futures. The ruling didn't solve every problem, but it restored predictability. Companies revisited investments and expansion plans. The economy could move from crisis mode to long-term planning. The court had given Americans a chance to rebuild. Stability, not instant prosperity, was the new promise. The Supreme Court's decision rippled across the globe. Financial markets from London to Tokyo welcomed the return of predictability. Allies and rivals alike saw an end to erratic U.S. trade disruptions. The ruling opened the door to de-escalating trade wars and repairing alliances. Even China reacted with cautious optimism, expecting more stable negotiations. The decision reaffirmed America's commitment to the rule of law. It showed the world that no single leader could upend global trade alone. Faith in U.S. institutions was restored. The world exhaled, reassured by American democracy's resilience. In Washington, a new era began. Unilateral trade actions were over. Congress and the president must now work together. The process will be slower, but it ensures broad debate and consensus. Businesses and workers gain stability, no more policy by tweet. Trade rules will be set by law, not executive whim. The ruling was a powerful lesson in democracy's strength. The judiciary corrected an imbalance, reaffirming the separation of powers. The unanimous decision showed the rule of law is above politics. America's strength lies in its resilient institutions, not unchecked leaders. The Supreme Court's decision set the nation on a path to a more stable, predictable, and constitutional future.